Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We do have a microphone if there's a need, if people are having difficulty hearing. I don't think you will, because Rabbi Lipman is quite used to public speaking. He's had to shout over many voices on the Knesset floor, so I'm sure that he knows how to project. It is a special privilege to welcome back Rabbi Dov Lipman to the BAYT. His last visit to our community was about 3.5 years ago, the end of June 2013, and those of you who were here may recall that it was shrouded in some level of controversy because that was when Rabbi Lipman was part of the Yesh Atid party, and as a Haredi Jew himself was representing a party that had presented a certain platform that directly impacted the Haredi community, of which the majority were opposed. And so it created very, very interesting dynamics in Israel. It created an interesting dynamic with his visit here, but I am so glad that we were able to do it, as much as I am glad that we are able to welcome him back. Tonight's visit, as his visit to Toronto over the last several days, is due to the good graces of Nefesh B'Nefesh, which is making a concerted effort as we speak to be able to begin new campaigns throughout North America to promote Aliyah. And as I was mentioning to Rabbi Lipman, who knows, maybe now with the recent elections we may have a new uptick in immigration from the United States, you never know. And we should tell them, better, instead of coming to Canada, you should go east to Israel. And also, Mizrahi Canada has been instrumental in making sure that Rabbi Lipman has an itinerary of activities, including the BAYT, and so we're very grateful to those two organizations. Since his departure from the Knesset, Rabbi Lipman has been involved in many, many different causes, really being a phenomenal spokesperson for the religious community for Israeli society. And I have to say that there's a certain part of me that is a bit envious of what Rabbi Lipman does. We all have our own pulpit. My pulpit, thank God, is an amazing congregation that is one of the largest in North America, and so therefore, when I say something, I know that I have a certain audience. Rabbi Lipman's pulpit is a much larger pulpit in the sense that he is able to present in a very Anglo-American way a message of acceptance, of love, of kindness, of sensitivity, really the way the American rabbi was trained to do. And I really feel that it's, and we owe a tremendous debt to Rabbi Lipman because he's really creating a Kiddush Hashem every time he represents religious Judaism in Israel to the secular Israeli society. So once again, it's a tremendous honor to welcome Rabbi Lipman back, and please.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Korobkin. You know, when I think back to that experience a few years ago, knowing that there was any controversy at all about my appearing in any shul anywhere was quite difficult for me, and knowing that there was a rabbi who was willing to stand up and be supportive and was so outwardly supportive in the way that you were was very helpful, and I really owe you a debt of gratitude for that and to the whole community for welcoming me at that time. I also want to thank Nefesh B'Nefesh for the opportunity to travel around and speak about the issue of Aliyah and acknowledge the presence of Mark Rosenberg from Nefesh B'Nefesh, who's here tonight, and certainly he's the address if anybody has any questions specific regarding Aliyah. When people ask me why we made Aliyah, I can't really answer the question with a well thought out intellectual answer. My wife and I were not planning on making Aliyah. We were quite comfortable living in Silver Spring, Maryland, my hometown. I was teaching in the schools I attended when I was younger. And then in November 2003, a few philanthropists in the greater Washington area got together and sponsored a school trip to Israel. They brought the entire high school, 200 students, on an 11-day trip to Israel, and they asked for chaperones to come along, and my wife and I jumped at the opportunity. And we started the trip up north, and they worked their way slowly towards Yerushalayim. And it was about 5 days into the trip, and we were on this bus heading up the mountains towards Yerushalayim. It was nighttime. They had a recording of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav in the background, and my wife and I were sitting next to each other on this bus, not saying one word to each other. Tears were just streaming down our cheeks. And I, of course, played the role of a very proud male, and I said, boy, these allergies are really something this time of year. But a few hours later, I had to confront the reality, and we looked at each other and we said, we have to live here. It was just, we just both felt it. Our oldest child at the time was 6 years old, so we figured this is a good time to do it so that our children can acclimate. And we contacted Nefesh B'Nefesh and made all the appropriate arrangements. I was blessed to find jobs teaching in yeshivot and seminaries in Israel, and we decided we were making Aliyah. Then in February 2004, a few months before our Aliyah, I had to make the most dreaded phone call. My grandmother, may she live and be well, continues to be an inspiration to our family, is a survivor of Auschwitz. And here she lived through that, rebuilt her family, is in the golden years of her life, enjoying her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We made a real effort to see her regularly, going from Maryland to New York. She knew my children, she knew her great-grandchildren, and I had to call her and tell her they were making Aliyah. And I didn't want to make this phone call. I picked up the phone, I put it down, picked it up, put it down again, and then I finally found the courage to call her. And I said, Bubby, I have some news for you. God willing, this summer, we're going to be moving to Israel, we're making Aliyah. And I was prepared for what I call the wrath of Bubby. My grandmother says it like it is, she doesn't hold back, and I was prepared for that. And there was a pause, and then my grandmother says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shehechiyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. And I said, Bubby, I wasn't expecting that reaction. Where did that come from? She said, when I was on the boat, going from DP camp in Europe to the United States, she said, the entire way I was asking myself, why am I going on a boat in this direction to another foreign country? I should be going on a boat in the other direction where a new Jewish state is being born in the Jewish homeland. And she said, and even though our experience in the United States has been far better than I could have ever imagined that it would be, she said, I have nothing but thanks to God for the fact that my grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be settling in the land of Israel. And I have to tell you, that blessing rings in my ears every single day. Because Aliyah is not easy. There's challenges at every twist and turn. Certainly, getting involved in Israeli politics is not easy, and there's a lot of ups and downs and difficult moments. But just hearing my grandmother's words of that Shechianu is something which really has been able to keep me going, and my wife and I together. So we were there, July 2004. We have this unbelievable experience, this Aliyah flight to Israel. We were the second Nefesh B'Nefesh charter flight. And Rabbi Fass, actually, the head of Nefesh B'Nefesh, spoke at the goodbye ceremony. It was an amazing ceremony at JFK Airport. And he pointed out that every single morning in our davening, and we actually also say it in the prayer for the state of Israel, which is largely dedicated to a diaspora Jewry coming back to Israel, we say the words, V'tolichenu komimiyut la'artzeinu. V'tolichenu la'artzeinu means we ask God to bring us back to our land. V'tolichenu la'artzeinu. What is that middle word, komiyut? What does that mean, komiyut la'artzeinu? So Rabbi Fass pointed out that all of the immigrants who came to Israel to build the land of Israel, the state of Israel, they were v'tolichenu la'artzeinu. They came back to our land. God brought them back to our land. But they came back as a broken people, as a persecuted people, people who were running away from something. That's v'tolichenu la'artzeinu. V'tolichenu komiyut la'artzeinu is asking God to let us come back to the land of Israel, not broken, but standing upright proud, by choice, not running away from something, but running to something. And that's what we were fulfilling on that day, and the blessing of the times that we live in, that we can accomplish that. We arrived in the land of Israel, amazing, 56 years old at the time, handed to us on a silver platter. Education for our children, housing, transportation, health services, built through blood, sweat, and tears, just handed to us. Here, come and enjoy this country. I learned at BAYT Shemesh, and I'm not going to go through the whole story of BAYT Shemesh. I did that last time I was here. But I learned at BAYT Shemesh that there's one thing we haven't figured out how to get right. And that is, how do you take Jews from 2,000 years of different experiences all around the world, religious, national, cultural experiences, put them in this small little area we call Israel, and find a way to get along with one another. That's what we haven't figured out how to get right. And through the struggles in BAYT Shemesh, I started thinking to myself, you know, here we are focused so much on security issues, legitimately. Hamas towards the south, Hezbollah towards the north, ISIS coming up from the east, Iran. But we know from all of our sources that the only chance we have of peace, of Geulah, is if we get ourselves in order from within. If we have infighting, all this strife within, we're never going to get anywhere with all these external issues. And I discovered that a lot of the tensions on religion and state in particular were being driven on a government level. Government level, where people were feeling religious coercion, or people were feeling they could flex their muscles, whatever it was. I wanted to get involved in politics. To be honest with you, I did not think for a moment that I could serve in the Knesset. I'm a proud graduate of 12 years of a Jewish day school education, but my Hebrew is not at the level where I could function in the Knesset, and therefore I didn't even think it was a possibility to function. I just wanted to be involved. And the new party was starting at the time, Yesh Atid, led by Yair Lapid. He was talking about trying to have religious and secular work together, and I got involved. I got to know Yair Lapid. We became close, and at a certain point he offered me to be number 17 on the party list for Knesset. Every party in Israel makes a list of, there's 120 seats in the Knesset. Every party makes a list of 120 names. They're very optimistic political parties. And I was number 17 on the Yesh Atid list. It was not realistic at all, according to any of the polls at the time. We were polling at about 5 seats or so. I just wanted to get involved. I just wanted to be involved in the process, especially after the elections. I figured I'd continue teaching and be involved in the laws that Yesh Atid wanted to write about the draft of the Haredi employment, religion and state issues. Just wanted to be involved. And then began the most incredible 3 months where I was involved in an election campaign in Israel. And I left my little English-speaking bubble in BAYT Shemesh, which was very comfortable and was very good to us. And I met Israel and spent 3 months going north, south, east, west, morning to night, going through shopping malls, universities, senior citizen homes, parlor meetings, and meeting the incredible people of Israel. I tell students all the time, I just had a group of students I was with, when you go to Israel, speak to your cab driver, speak to your bus driver, ask them their stories. The most incredible stories throughout Israel. People with such determination, perseverance, ingenuity, just incredible. And it was so inspiring for me just to get to know Israel. And there we were on election night after those 3 months, and we're in a large ballroom, and they announced the results, and we're celebrating 19 seats. It was a big surprise. And overnight, I found myself elected to the Knesset, something which I didn't expect the whole time. All of a sudden happened. We had Knesset school for our party, because all 19 of us were new to the Knesset. What does it mean to be a member of Knesset? How do you take an idea and turn it into a law? What are all the committees? And working really, really hard. You have 2 weeks between the election and the inauguration. And I came home one day, and there was an official letter waiting for me from the Knesset. I remember I was so excited. I have official mail from the Knesset. And I opened it up. I remember exactly where I was standing because it was so traumatic. The letter said that according to Israeli law, it's forbidden for me to be sworn in as a member of Knesset if I hold citizenship in another country as well. And you make aliyah, so you become Israeli, you have Israeli ID number and a passport, but we hold on to our citizenship, and I was a dual citizen in the United States. I come from a very patriotic American family. The American flag hangs outside our house all year. My father, Zechron Livracha, was a federal judge in the U.S. government. My father-in-law was a U.S. Army chaplain for decades. My wife grew up on U.S. Army bases, very American family. And I had to go to the U.S. Embassy and renounce my citizenship. There are actually two of us who had to do it. For those of you who follow Israeli politics, you'll enjoy this. It was myself and Naftali Bennett. Naftali was so happy. Get rid of this foreign citizenship thing, and I was completely traumatized by it. And I got through it. It wasn't an easy process, but I got through it. I actually remember thinking to myself while I was doing it, among other things, I can't believe that I'm not going to vote in future U.S. elections. I got to tell you, it was a pleasure to sit out of this one as a spectator and watch everyone else deal with it. But a few hours later, there was this really special realization to think to myself, I'm Israeli. After 2,000 years of my family going around from country to country, wandering around the world, here I am. I'm Israeli. I have no official connection to any other country in the world, and there's something truly special about that. So we get to the inauguration, this tremendous pomp and circumstance, an amazing day, and my first order of business was the issue of Hebrew. I was so nervous about the Hebrew. I was nervous that I'd stand up at the Knesset podium and people would have no idea if I'm talking about past, present, or future, masculine, feminine, the whole thing. I was so nervous about it. I was also nervous about making some kind of a massive mistake and the Israeli Saturday Night Live would make a mockery of me. So I made it a focus of mine. And the Knesset gives a budget to every member of Knesset to learn a second language. Most use it for English, some for Arabic, and some for Russian. I made Knesset history. I was the first sitting member of Knesset to use my budget to learn Hebrew. And every single Sunday at 2:30, my tutor Nadav would come, and this guy worked me so hard. He gave me homework, he critiqued all of my speeches, and showed me all of my mistakes. And over time, I really felt the change happening as I was able to learn Hebrew. And I tell everyone, do not let the issue of Hebrew be an obstacle for you making Aliyah. It's there. It's scary, and we're afraid of it. But I have no special talents when it comes to learning a language. I just worked really hard. I was actually inspired very much by my grandmother, who I remember telling me that when she came to America, she used to sit and read the newspaper and write down words she didn't understand and look them up, and that's what I did. I read Hebrew newspapers, I wrote down words I didn't understand, I made it a real focus of mine, and thank God I was able to reach success. I do not speak Hebrew the way I communicate in English. It's still a real effort. Every time I got up to speak at the Knesset podium, I was nervous beforehand and really had to practice to make sure that I could communicate whatever message I was trying to convey, but it's possible. And I also learned something else during this process. I won't ask for a show of hands because I know it's 100%. We go to Israel, we make the effort to speak Hebrew, and Israelis respond to us in English. And it's frustrating, right? Here I am, I'm trying to speak Hebrew, and they're answering me in English. So I'll let you in on a little secret. In the Knesset, from the security guard at the door to the Prime Minister himself, people are talking to me in English. And it was making me crazy. Here I am, I'm speaking Hebrew, and people are talking to me in English. So one day I asked a colleague of mine, Mickey Levy, I said, Mickey, why are people talking to me in English? Is my Hebrew that bad that you have to talk to me in English? And he said, your Hebrew is not bad at all. You're in the country 9 years and you're speaking the way you're speaking, it's fantastic. I said, so why are you speaking to me in English? He said, we, as Israelis, we hear somebody who clearly has an English-speaking accent, we just want to speak English. We want to be a part of your world and show that we know English. It's nothing to do with your Hebrew. So when you go to Israel and you speak Hebrew and people speak English to you, keep speaking Hebrew. Don't give up. It has nothing to do with your level of Hebrew. So that was issue number one, was trying to tackle the issue of Hebrew. The most important lesson I learned during my time in the Knesset, and I learned it very quickly, was that in the Knesset, and you'll be shocked to hear this, because as much as people think it's a big polarized institution where everyone's fighting with one another, that's very much relegated to politics. But I started to learn very quickly that the closest personal relationships exist between members of Knesset who have differing ideologies from one end to the other. They don't let it become personal. It's an incredible thing. In that main room that you see where we meet, in the Malaya and the plenum, That's where you see all the screaming and yelling at each other. What you don't see is right behind that room, there's another room, which I wish the cameras would show, where they have comfortable chairs and couches, and they serve coffee and tea, and you can literally have two members of Knesset screaming at each other in session, and no more than 10 minutes later, they're in the back room on the couch. How are the kids? How's the family? How's the vacation? Best of friends, talking to each other, knowing each other for years. Just to give you an example of this concept, so there was a fantastic minister, unfortunately he passed away at a young age, named Uri Auerbach from the BAYT party. Uri is the sweetest soul. He came over to me the first day at the inauguration, saw that I'm new, I'm an American in the Knesset, and he came over and he said, Dov, if there's a different party, not my party. He said, if there's anything I can do to help you, any guidance you need, please come to me. And I took advantage of that, and I became close to him and missed him terribly. He passed away at a young age. And when Uri Auerbach from the BAYT, a right-wing religious party, was on his deathbed, who was with him? The members of his family and one member of Knesset, his closest friend. Member of Knesset, Ilan Gilon, from the Meretz party. Meretz party is a far left-wing secular party. BAYT, Meretz. We assume we have to be enemies. Left-wing, right-wing, religious, secular. They were the closest of friends, and Ilan was there with Uri as he passed away. In our party, Yair Lapid, someone who out there everyone thinks is anti-this, anti-religion, whatever it is, and of course I disagree with that, and I work very closely together with him, but one of his closest friends in the Knesset is a member of the Shas party, Yitzhak Cohen, who is currently the deputy finance minister. And I'd see this throughout. And it was a tremendous, tremendous lesson for me. Because before I was in the Knesset, I would read the Jerusalem Post, I would see people's politics, whatever it was. What kind of a Jew is this? What kind of a Zionist? I would make it personal. And I learned in the Knesset not to do that. And this is something we can all learn in our lives in shuls and schools also. It's not just in the Knesset. That we can have disagreements. We should have disagreements. We should have disagreements. There's different opinions about things. But not to let it cross over and become something which is personal. One of the greatest moments in the Knesset, which really captures this idea, we were in the middle of session about the draft legislation of the Haredim. You can imagine what that session was like. It started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and went till somewhere towards 4 o'clock the next morning. And we're in session, there's passions. People believe strongly in their opinions about this issue. Legitimately, there's real sides to this issue. And around 9 o'clock at night, there was a pause in the action. Because of some technicality, there was just quiet for a moment in the room. And this is what I hear. Mariv. And we all went out to that back room, and we davened Mariv together. Some of the quote-unquote secular members, I'll get back to that in a moment, put like napkins on their heads and joined in. We davened Mariv together. And I was standing there during Shema and just watching this scene. Right? This is the scene that all of Am Yisrael has to see. They see us fighting in the Knesset all the time, but do they see that we can take a pause from that and join together and daven Mariv together? And that they don't see. But for me, it was a very important lesson. This idea of secular Israel. Secular Israel. We have the Datiyim and the Chilonim. I learned pretty quickly, but I needed to be in politics to learn this, that this notion of secular is really a misnomer. There are some Israelis who are really secular. But I learned it actually during the election campaign, actually. One of our first events was a Hanukkah event, and they had a candle lighting. So I thought to myself, okay, I'll give Yair Lapid the chance to light Hanukkah candles, and I'll have him light. And I go over to Yair Lapid, the secular icon in Israel, and I said, Yair, maybe you want to light candles. And he says to me, why should I live at home? Why should I light here? And he, like, just matter of fact. And I started learning that all of these secular Israelis make Kiddush on Friday night, they light Shabbat candles, they fast on Yom Kippur, they don't eat Chametz on Pesach, they have a Haggadah Leil Seder, it's just a culture in Israel. We use this term secular, and it's something which is important for us to remember, because as we talk about these issues, religious, secular, we have to remember what we're talking about. And one of the blessings of returning to the land of Israel is that it's a Jewish land, and that spirituality does exist throughout the land, and that's part of being in Israel as well. You get to the Knesset, and you're a member of parliament, you want to pass legislation. You want to impact the country, make a difference. So the party gave me 4 areas of focus. I was the head of the Knesset task force to help Haredim get to work. That was actually one of my primary focuses, and thank God we've helped thousands and thousands of Haredim get jobs, get training, get jobs, and support their families with dignity. That certainly was a focus. But I wanted to write laws. That's what you want to do as a member of parliament. So the party gave me 3 areas of focus. I was in charge of public health, the environment, and Tzar Baalei Chayim, protecting animals from unnecessary suffering. And the truth is, it was a real honor, a thrill to have those 3 areas because they're all Torah values. They're all core Jewish values mentioned in the Torah. So I figured I'm going to work on bringing the whole Knesset together, uniting the people together around one of these core values. So I met with the animal groups in Israel, and I asked them, is there any law that we could pass, a simple law? A law that doesn't cost any money, because the Israeli budget is such that you can't pass legislation which costs more money to a country which spends so much of its percentage of its budget on defense. We don't have free money to spend. Something which doesn't cost money but can make a difference. So I apologize in advance if any of you like this delicacy. I'm not here to preach to you about it. But they showed me how this food called foie gras is produced. It's fattened goose liver. It's a pretty horrific process, which involves causing the animal to suffer tremendously before the shechita. I'm not talking about shechita at all, just before the shechita. In fact, there are many rabbanim, including Rabbi Dov Lipman, who say it's forbidden to eat it because of what the animal has gone through before it's produced. So they showed me these videos. I was pretty horrified by it. Israel has already banned the production of foie gras. Israel is quite progressive on these issues. They wanted to ban the import of foie gras. They wanted to say, let's be a country which stands up and says, we will not have anything to do with torturing animals in this way, just for our own enjoyment. So I went around the Knesset, and I asked the various parties. I asked, the Haredi parties, they support it. The secular parties support it. Everyone in between. The Arab parties, they support it. This is unbelievable. We're going to have this great unity in the Knesset. We're going to rally together and make a statement as a Jewish country. We're not going to have this food in our country. The law goes to the Ministerial Committee of Legislation, which is the first step. It passes, and then it comes to the Knesset floor for a vote. I had the honor, you stand up in front of the Knesset and you present your law, and the speaker then calls the vote. If you've never seen this scene before, by the way, you should watch it. You have this 10 seconds between the call for the vote and the actual vote, and there's this dramatic countdown on the screens in the room, and members are running back and forth and bumping into each other because you have to get to your seat to vote. The vote happens and it passes. And you think that's exciting, right? Because the vote has passed. That's step 1 in the law moving forward. The law then has to go to committee. It has to be voted out of committee. It comes back to the Knesset for another vote. Then it goes back to the committee again. It has to be voted out of committee, and it comes back for 2 more votes consecutively. That's one of the reasons why a lot doesn't get done. It's a very long process and a very tedious process. The law went to committee, and right around that time, Yair Lapid, as finance minister in Israel, traveled to Hungary to lobby the Hungarian parliament to pass legislation linking anti-Semitic attacks with hate crimes. There was a rise in anti-Semitism in Hungary, and we wanted to strengthen the penalty to fight on behalf of the Jews living in Hungary. He gets to Hungary, he has this photo op with the foreign minister of Hungary, and the foreign minister of Hungary leans over to Yair Lapid and says, we have a problem with a guy in your party named Lipman. And Yair Lapid's thinking to himself, what can you possibly be talking about? He says he has this law banning the import of foie gras. He says foie gras is one of Hungary's #1 exports. If you ban this legislation, you ban the import of foie gras, many other countries might follow. This will be catastrophic to Hungary's economy. We will not discuss anti-Semitism unless you promise that this law is not moving forward. And Yair Lapid contacted me, and I had to promise that I'm not going to move forward, and I have to put the law aside. The law has stalled. And thank God he made the speech in Parliament. It was very dramatic, and they passed legislation there. This gives you an example. You can have the best of ideas, and out of nowhere, the Hungarian Parliament comes in and stops it from happening. Just to give you an idea, though, of a success, where a small little piece of paper, one law, how it can make a difference. So the Knesset meets every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Thursday is a day to travel around Israel and meet with organizations, meet with communities, find out what their needs are, and try to represent those needs. So one Thursday, I went to a place called the Israel Guide Dog Center for the Blind. Amazing place, where they're helping blind people throughout Israel get guide dogs, and I met with blind people in the center who told me, one of them said to me, before I had a dog, he said I was dead. And it struck me, because the Gemara says, Suma Kemet, that a blind person is like a dead person. He actually used that terminology. He said, now I have my dog, I can do anything I want. He goes mountain climbing in Europe with his guide dog. Amazing place, helping people in the greatest chesed. As we were leaving the campus, there was a house right on the outskirts of the campus, and they told me to look through the window. I looked through the window, and walking around the floor of this house are these little puppies, a week old, 2 weeks old. They're breeding guide dogs in the guide dog center. And I said, you train these little puppies to be guide dogs? And they said, no. During the first year, families have to adopt, foster the puppies. The family has 2 jobs during this year, to toilet train the puppy and to bring it everywhere and make sure that it remains calm wherever it goes. If it hears a siren, it can't bark. If it sees a cat, it can't chase after it. Your job is to teach the dog to be completely calm in all situations. Fascinating. And then after the year, they give it back to the center, and they train them to be guide dogs. I went home that night. I'm having dinner with my family, and told them about my day, and I was not prepared for the onslaught from my 3 daughters, not requesting, but demanding that we get one of these puppies. So there we were 5 weeks later. Little Mondo came into our lives. He was a week or 2 old when we got him. I was holding him in my arms just like this. And we had Mondo for the year. And the truth is, my wife really did most. I brought him to the Knesset twice, but my wife really took him around during this year. One night, my wife said to me, it's so frustrating. I bring Mondo everywhere with me, and I go to the bank, and the security guard says you can't bring the dog in. I go to the mall, and they say you can't bring the dog in. Right? Someone who, God forbid, is blind, of course, they by law, they can go anywhere with a dog. But my wife is not in that situation, and they wouldn't let her bring it, and she was frustrated by it. And I was frustrated by her frustration. It was frustrating that we couldn't do the job properly. And I'm laying in bed that night, going to sleep, and thinking about it, and all of a sudden it hit me. I'm a member of parliament. I can do something about this. And I went to work the next day, and wrote a law that says that if you are fostering a puppy to be a guide dog, the state gives you a card, and it's against the law for anyone to say that you can't go into any place. You can go anywhere you want to, and thank God through a very long, tedious process, eventually it's voted into law, and the Guide Dog Center told me that they believe, as a result of this law, that there'd be a 25% increase in dogs that pass the course. Because the people who have them during that year will be able to do their jobs. So a small little piece of paper. But think about the impact that it can have on people's lives. It's tremendous to be part of that experience of trying to take a country and make it better. It's so easy to sit back at the Shabbat table and complain about everything that's happening. And here I was blessed with the opportunity to be in the Knesset to actually try to work towards making changes. So working very hard in domestic areas on all these laws and all these initiatives. My second week in the Knesset, I got a call from the Speaker's office. The Speaker of the Knesset told me there's a group of French members of Parliament in the building. They want me to meet with them. I said, I have no background in foreign policy, in public diplomacy. I'm not in the Knesset on that background. I shouldn't be meeting with them. I learned over time that I was one of the handful of members of Knesset who could speak English fluently, so I was thrown into this role. And I walked into the room, and I started talking about all the wonderful things that are happening in Israel. Technology, medical advances. There had just been a natural disaster somewhere, and Israel was the only country with a field hospital on the ground helping all the wonderful things Israel's doing. Member of the French Parliament, about 4 minutes into my wonderful presentation, says, we're not here to hear about this. We are here because you are involved in this settlement enterprise. He says, because of your settlement enterprise, building settlements, radical Islam is spreading throughout the world, and we're here to ask you to stop building settlements. Now, I come from a party on the political map, which is center in the political map. We don't ignore the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I am prepared, in the right circumstance, to make compromises to try to resolve it. But for someone to tell me that because we're building settlements, radical Islam is spreading in France, there's a limit to what I can accept. So I threw out a question, which I meant as a rhetorical question to this group of members of the French Parliament. I said, could somebody please tell me when the PLO was established? And I meant it as a rhetorical, I just wanted to start a conversation. I wasn't challenging them. Would you believe 20 members of the French Parliament are in the Knesset to pressure us to stop building settlements? They did not know the answer to that question. And I said 1964, 1965, before 1967, before there were any settlements at all. If you want to have a conversation about settlements, we can. But to suggest that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is because of settlement building, you have it all wrong. And at that moment, I made it my mission, because I realized there's so much misinformation out there, to travel to parliaments all around the world, to go to college campuses all around the world, and make the case for Israel. And by the way, I'll just tell you, I spoke in wonderful schools here over the last few days, and I mean that sincerely, where I saw Israel education, or excitement for Israel being taught, beautiful. I will tell you that I asked the question, does anybody know when the PLO was established? And wonderful students, I'm not blaming anyone, they didn't know the answer to that question. We have to educate our children to have the information to be able to advocate for Israel. Because they're going to go to college campuses one day, and they're going to be hit with all of this anti-Israel propaganda, and they have to know. So that was another mission which was part, and I want to tell you, whatever you hear in the media, anti-Israel, whatever people say in front of cameras, it's nothing compared to what's said behind closed doors. Nothing. I'd sit with members of parliament, especially in Europe, but all over. Nothing compared to what you hear. You cannot believe it. And a lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it is actually based on complete misinformation about what's actually happening. Nothing can be better than bringing them to Israel, seeing the facts on the ground, delegations in Israel. Nothing can be better. I have to tell you parenthetically that the greatest moment, actually, of Zionism in my time in Knesset was when your Prime Minister came to the Knesset. He gave a more Zionistic speech than any member of Knesset ever gave, to be honest with you. So I'm not going to say that all out there is horrible, but I learned during this time what a challenge we have and how much we really are alone. We really are alone, and we have to take care of ourselves and make the case for Israel for ourselves, but also make decisions for ourselves. All of this work, domestic, foreign policy, all of these things came to a screeching halt in June 2014. In June 2014, we woke up one Friday morning, and we got a message saying that it seems that 3 boys have been kidnapped. We heard recordings pretty early on, which we kept quiet, but which seemed to indicate that it did not end very well. But again, you hold out hope that what you heard wasn't necessarily exactly how it played out. I was fortunate, and I use that word even though it's uncomfortable, to become very close during those few weeks with these incredible families, these incredible mothers who just lifted a whole country on their shoulders and sat there during this horrible, horrible funeral. And then we went to war. And as members of Knesset, our schedules changed completely. It used to be that I would go to the Knesset every day and be given my schedule, committee hearings, votes, party meetings, media interviews. Your whole day is scheduled out for you. As during wartime, it changed. And it became go to a funeral for a soldier who was killed, go to Shiva House. They divided up members of Knesset to make sure that there was representation in all of these things, to go to the hospital, visit injured soldiers, and go to the border of Gaza and meet with the soldiers there. 50 days, which were the darkest 50 days I ever experienced, where I saw suffering in an up-close and personal way like I've never experienced. But with all of that darkness, it was also the most inspiring 50 days that I've experienced. And I could sit here for hours and tell you anecdotes, just to tell you 2. Go to the border of Gaza and meet with the soldiers. So I wanted to bring the soldiers something. I felt I shouldn't go to the border empty-handed. So my mother had raised around $1,000 in Maryland to do something for the soldiers. So I asked my spokesman, Benji, I said, what can I do for the soldiers? So Benji, who was a former IDF soldier, he said to me, you should bring them ice cream. I said, come on. I'm going to go to the border of Gaza and bring them ice cream? He said, you asked me, as a former IDF soldier, what I would want? Ice cream. So we called up Ben & Jerry's, and we ordered $1,000 worth of ice cream cups, and we go to the border of Gaza. If you remember later, when you go home, just go on YouTube and type in my name and ice cream. There's a little clip of this. And we go to the border, and by the way, it's a scary, scary place. This is a staging area where there's zero warning. If Hamas fires mortar, and we lost soldiers there during that time, there's no warning to go anywhere. And we go there, and they have these bunkers along the border, and there's a tarp over these bunkers, and I pick up the tarp, and I see these soldiers lying there. They had just been in Gaza for 24, 48 hours, and they're lying there resting. And I said, anybody want any ice cream? And they became little children. They were climbing over one another to come for this ice cream. It was incredible to see. And I was watching them. I've never seen ice cream appreciated this way, savoring every drop of this ice cream cup. Benji had it exactly right. This is what they wanted. And they asked me, where's this ice cream from? It's not part of the regular rations of the IDF. And I said, it's from people in Maryland who sent you something. And they said, people in Maryland? I said, yeah. They said, what do you mean people in Maryland? What's the connection to us? I said, Jews all around the world are thinking about you, are praying for you, hope that you come home safely. And I want all of you to know, because I have no doubt that this community did many efforts for the soldiers as well. I saw how it lit up their faces. I saw it. To realize that they're not just fighting for their families, for Israel, that they're fighting for all the Jewish people. I saw how it inspired them, and we shouldn't be in future conflicts, but if we are, do everything you can. Send every message to the soldiers. It means the world to them. And it was a moment where I really felt the unity of the Jewish people. You know, across the oceans, this special nation where people sitting back in North America are sending things thousands of miles away, and I really felt what a connected and special people we are. The other anecdote that I'll choose, I got a phone call that a lone soldier from California by the name of Max Steinberg was killed in Gaza. And they asked me to contact Max's parents, not to notify them. They were already notified by the Consul General in Los Angeles, but they wanted me to reach out to them. They were still deciding where to bury him. They eventually decided to bury Max in Israel. His parents had never been to Israel before. Max's family had no connection to Israel. Max's brother and sister decided to go on a birthright trip. They had to pressure Max to go on this birthright trip. He didn't want to go. He went. Max fell in love with the people of Israel. He just loved the people of Israel, and he decided while he was on birthright to give up going back to university life in California and to fight in the IDF. He came to Israel. He was a small guy. He was 5'3", and he was rejected from the unit he wanted to get into, the Golani unit. He fought his way into it. He got into it and became this superstar kid. All the soldiers loved the American in their unit. And Max was killed in Gaza. And I told his parents, there'll be a small, respectful ceremony for Max at Har Herzl Cemetery in Yerushalayim. I explained to them some of the religious aspects of the ceremony. We get to Har Herzl on a summer afternoon for Max's burial, and there were 35,000 people there. 35,000 Israelis heard that a kid from California decided to come and fight in the IDF and lost his life fighting for Israel, and they came to give him respect. And I spoke to the crowd, and Max's parents told me about him, and Max was a big Bob Marley fan, and his favorite line, which he lived by, was live for yourself and live in vain. Live for others, live again. And that was Max Steinberg. Max didn't live for himself, he lived for others, and thousands of Israelis were inspired by his story. And standing there at the gravesite, at the burial, Max's mother said to me, now I know why Max decided to fight in Israel. Seeing these people, she said, I feel a collective hug from the people of Israel. And his parents tell me regularly they would not have been able to get through this without that outpouring from Israel. And again, this very difficult moment, but what an inspiring moment to see the incredible people of Israel who recognized what Max gave up and made the effort to come and give Max that kind of respect. People often ask me, am I optimistic about Israel's future? They ask me that, they say, especially you're behind the scenes, you saw the way things work in government. What's the real deal? What's going to happen with Israel? And I have to tell you that after my experience serving the Knesset, I'm nothing but filled with optimism about Israel's future. The greatest moment that I had in the Knesset was when the Knesset decided to go on a Knesset delegation to Poland. I went to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And there I found myself, it was my first visit there. There I found myself walking along this train platform, the same platform where 70 years earlier, my grandmother arrived there on Shavuot night, surrounded on all sides by soldiers, barking orders at them, sending my great-grandparents and my grandmother's siblings to be killed that night. My grandmother was spared because she was younger, together with one of her sisters. And there I found myself, at that spot, surrounded on all sides by soldiers, by Israeli soldiers in dress uniforms, proudly holding their Israeli flags. I was able to say Kaddish for my great-grandparents on that spot as a proud member of the Israeli Knesset. 70 years later, and I shouldn't be optimistic about where Israel's heading. We live in the most incredible times. The most incredible times where open prophecies are coming true in front of our eyes. You read the Haftorahs between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, the 7 Haftorahs of comfort, where God comforts us after destruction. You don't need any commentaries. No Malbim, no Radak, nothing. Just read the Psukim. The reflourishing of the land of Israel. For 100 years, for 2,000 years, the land is desolate. 100 years ago, a group of refugees come back to the land, and God's promise comes true. It starts reflourishing. The ingathering of the exiles, Kibbutz Galiot, every Monday at 2:30 in the Knesset, our party had a party meeting. And we sat together, and I'd look around the room. And looking around the room, just at my own party, I saw members of Knesset, immigrants from the former Soviet Union, members of Knesset, immigrants from Ethiopia, immigrants from Morocco, English-speaking countries, other European countries. It's happening now. The land of Israel is opening up its arms and ingathering God's children, exactly as the prophecies say. My grandmother, may she live and be well, found the strength to make the trip to Israel. And she came to my Knesset office, and she sat there, and she said, Dov, this doesn't make any sense. A Jewish state, Jewish capital in Yerushalayim, Jewish parliament, my grandson is a member of this parliament. It doesn't make any sense. And she's right. It doesn't make any sense. There are other forces at work over here. And we're blessed to live in this time. Think for a moment what our great-great-grandparents would have given to breathe the air of Yerushalayim for 10 minutes. 10 minutes to breathe the air of Yerushalayim. And here we live in this time where God has given us this gift, our Yerusha. It's here right in front of us. And the call to all of us is for each one of us to decide how we're going to respond to that call. For some of us, it's going to be to explore making Aliyah, do exactly what I did. You pick up the phone and you call Nefesh B'Nefesh, you contact them online, you get all the information you need from A to Z. And I want to tell you, there's no age which is too late to make Aliyah. One of the most popular, successful ages of Aliyah is the 55 plus range. I and my own family had the greatest story of that kind of Aliyah when my mother, as a true Jewish mother, made Aliyah in order to vote for me to get into the Knesset. But as a result of that strange impetus to make Aliyah, she says she never would have realized that it's the greatest retirement imaginable. She's busy day and night. She's busy running to shiurim, running to tours, it's incredible. When she's in Maryland, she has whatever, but the most incredible retirement. If people can't make Aliyah, so raise your children to make Aliyah. Raise your children with that value. Like I said, join them afterwards. For those who can't, certainly be advocates for Israel, be ambassadors for Israel. We need the help all around the world. But to be there and all of us unified together, and hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem, if all of us take advantage of this gift that God has given us, each one in our own ways, God willing will be able to move, and God will see that appreciation that we have for the gift that He has given us. We'll be able to move on from the Yemot HaMashiach, from the Messianic times, to the Geulah Shlema, Shekam B'Meher V'Yameinu. And I thank all of you for listening, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you have.